Good evening and welcome to the Investment Advisory Panel meeting. It is now 7 p.m. and I would like to start this meeting. I am Councillor Kerrin and I will be chair for this meeting. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for publication on the Council's website. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Carly, can I have any apologies for absence, please?
We've received apologies from Councillor Green.
Okay. Councillor Cockshaw?
Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Spate. That's okay. Agenda item number 2, minutes from previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the Investment Advisory Panel meeting held on the 2nd of July 2024 be approved as a correct record. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 3. Items of urgent business. I have not agreed to any items of urgent business. There is one exempt item on the agenda where the meeting will pause so members of the public can leave, and this part of the meeting will not be recorded. Agenda item number 4, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest to make? Councillor Spates.
I'm not sure it's a declaration of interest in terms of a pecuniary interest or whatever. It's more a declaration of disinterest, really. I really think I've looked very hard in the last few days at the reasons why this committee was convened and when it was convened and what its purpose was.
Yeah.
And I just think we're all wasting our time because, quite frankly, we've had a situation that came up, and it's in the minutes. If you remember the last time we convened in June, there have been significant things that have happened since June, significant things. And the remit of this committee is that we are invited to observe, discuss and give an opinion to senior figures within the council, i.e. the leader and the cabinet. And we haven't done so, and nobody's called us in. We haven't had, the decision to go with apps and all the other things like that are relevant. From what I understand from the minutes going to, from the agenda going to full council shortly, it appears a decision has been taken not to sell the Thameside complex, which is a massive thing and a decision I firmly applaud as it happens, but nevertheless, it's a significant interest. So as I say, it's more an item of disinterest than interest. Has the time not come to be honest and say this committee is really pointless?
Thank you for that, Councillor Spate. What I would suggest is I'd obviously respect your opinion, and I know how much sort of effort and work you put into all your committees and meetings. Why don't we go through the agenda, and then if at the end of it we have that feeling, then we openly and frankly discuss it and perhaps use the work programme to specifically, like you've mentioned about leader and cabinet and things like that. Why don't we look at things that we want to specifically happen and put it on the work programme and see how it goes from there? But I've noted your disinterest.
I'll be honest with you, I'm thinking more about the precious time of our officer cohort preparing for us, because they've got so much damned hard work to do. This was probably an unnecessary inconvenience for them.
Well, that leads us nicely onto item number 5, because firstly, there's been an error on the agenda that it's not an actual financial strategy update because of the constitution of this committee. However, Dawn Calvert's here, and I'm going to open it up for questions from this committee. And why don't we, sort of Councillor Spate and others, why don't we use this opportunity to directly question our officers who have turned up to field questions and to, listen to our point of view. Is there anything you'd like to say, Dawn, before I open up to the floor?
Thank you, Chair. I think, because I think responding to Councillor Spade, I think that Councillor Spade makes, and I'll ask Mark to help me out in case because Mark's better at words than me as an accountant. I think Councillor Spade raises a good valid point in that this committee was set up at a point in time. Obviously things have moved on. I think it's quite a good time to look at where the things that would traditionally come to this committee, where could they still be reported in the public domain? So, for example, just to give you an example, a couple of the things that I've reported on in the past and Rob's reported on is one of the strands of our financial strategy, which naturally goes to December and February Cabinet, is the asset disposals and divestments. Now, what we are trying to do, and I'll be honest with you, Councillor Spate, we've only got there, I would say 50% for Q2, is to make sure that an update of those, of where we are with those, this was the plan, this is where we are, and this is why there is a variance, goes as part of that Q2 revenue and capital monitoring to Cabinet. So that goes through Cabinet quarterly. It goes to the various scrutiny panels beforehand. So that might be a better route for those information, because at the moment that's very limited. So there is a plan, and so I think it's maybe about thinking what comes here, where would perhaps be an alternative route. So there is still all the transparency, but what is maybe in a more appropriate route. Because I did actually speak to the Commissioner about this, Nicole, and very much wanting to keep the spirit of the transparency, but if this committee has perhaps naturally come to an end, is there a piece of work to do to say what would be a way forward?
Okay, well I mean, I'll take any comments in just a moment if anyone wants to, but I think you raised a good point there, Dawn, but out of respect for the fact you're here, Rob's here, Mark is here, we'll sort of question you on the items that you've brought, and then when we get to the work programme, perhaps we turn that into a discussion about do we put things on the work programme, or do we recommend ourselves out of existence through the work programme? I think that might be a way. Yeah? Okay. So, I think I'm the only chair who'd talk himself out of a job potentially, but we'll see how it goes. We might end up finding a sort of a new lease as such. So, Dawn, is there anything you want to say verbally to us in terms of I know it's not an official report, but by way of update that we can then sort of question on, please?
In terms of the first item, the financial strategy, I mean, the financial strategy will go to the draft budget, and MTFS will go to December Cabinet. So obviously we had the draft saving proposals at ONS at the scrutiny committee last week. The proposals will formally it goes through the Cabinet route, so it'll go to December Cabinet along with the draft MTFS, and then obviously that proceeds through the Cabinet and Council route in February. So putting that on the agenda was unfortunately an error. There isn't anything that would come through. This is not really the place. It goes through an alternative Cabinet route. So I don't really think there's anything to update, to be fair, Councillor, because all I can say is we took our proposals to meet our savings target for next year to the ONS committee, and there'll have been some members that were here. Well, actually, all our members were here. Were at the committee last week. So obviously we all heard the debate about that. The draft MTFS is going to get published on Tuesday as part of the Cabinet paper, so it's not really appropriate for me to say anything about that at the moment. So I don't really think I've got an update, if I'm being honest, that hasn't already been in the public domain. Then stuff that will get published next Tuesday. Yeah.
We kind of fall awkwardly between the ONS and the Cabinet meeting. Okay, well, with that in mind, just while we've got Dawn here, is there any questions from members at all? Either Councillor Cecil, Cockshaw or Spate? Is that yes, Councillor Cecil?
Yes. My view, if that's not quite a question, is some of us are not privy to some of the information that goes to chairs and vice chairs. So I've always got open ears. I'm ready to listen to what officers have to say, and I will do my best with information given to me, and I will question it as I see it. But I rely on very much your information, because yes, I'm not privy to much information.
So in terms of the MTFS, all that information will be published as part of the cabinet paper next week. So obviously, this is not the route for that information. So obviously, you were at the ONS committee, so you saw all the saving proposals and all the information. The December report will cover them, and then what we've also done is we've done an update of our medium-term financial strategy. So we've just talked. So what I'm just going to say in the report is, we've sort of taken this year's budget and projected it forward with some with a few revisions, and that's what I'm going to report through the December cabinet. So I can't really say anything else, because that will all come out through the December cabinet report.
Yes, Councillor Cecil.
There was something I picked up at one of the recent meetings where you were going to go to a 2-year or even further, which was a progression. Is there anything you can tell us about the investment strategies that would be picked up on a 2-year when we're moving away from a 1-yearly budget forecast?
I'm not. So internally, we have a 4-year medium-term financial strategy. So we will forecast 4 years forward with the best information we can. So we will say make estimates about council tax increases, council tax base pressures, etc. So internally, we produce a 4-year medium-term financial strategy. So it's like a 4-year budget. If what you're referring to, and we're not going to change that, so we will always do that, and we do a 5-year capital programme. If what you're referring to is maybe what the government has been proposing in terms of a settlement for government, because is that what you're referring to, the settlement that we receive as a council?
Oh, we moved on to a progression. I've picked that up. What I'm asking is, how does these investments fit in to the 2-year? Because that is seen as a progression, a move forward. We're extending our boundaries.
Yeah, okay. So what we have is we do have a plan of asset disposals. So what we have as council, we have several plans. So we have our overarching medium-term financial strategy, which sets our budget for the next 4 years. We'll continue with that. Obviously, the next year will be as accurate as we can. We might have to make some estimates for future years. We have a plan of asset disposals, which obviously we've got a set plan, and what Robbie's going to explain to us tonight, it's a plan that, like a lot of things, will be subject to change, and we have got some changes to that plan. And then we have a plan of asset divestments. That plan is not going to change from 1-year plan, because I'm just looking at my piece of paper. Originally, it was a 6-year plan, so they were going to be divested over a 6-year period. That remains in place, but what we will be doing as part of our budget strategies is just updating that divestment. So the divestments that we've got to still make, are they still at the same value as at the plans a year ago? Because assets change in value, and is the timing of them still the same? And that's all part of our annual financial strategy. So we're not going to change anything for a 1 to a 2-year. We have a plan. We've been working through that plan. As part of all our other financial plans for the next year, we will just be reviewing that to make sure that the values that we had as at over a year ago are still the same.
So since July, there's been change, and we're going to be offered some of that change from.
Now, what I would aspire to do, if as a finance officer, we take a quarterly update to Cabinet every quarter. So the first, and what that report does is it covers capital and revenue, and it says, this is our budget, and this is where we're forecasting to be by the end of the year. So are we in budget, overspent, underspent? What we have started to do is I would like to see that the plans that we have, so our divestments and our asset disposals, are part of that quarterly report. So, for example, next year, when we've set a plan at the 1st of April, which will go through February Cabinet, we will have a plan of asset disposals that we set for the next 4 years. I would like to report, as part of that quarterly report through Cabinet, I would like to give you an update on where we are with those disposals. And I would like to do the same for divestments, because to me that all knits in terms of all the financial plans, so that it's very aware that we're either on plan, we're a bit behind, we're a bit forward, and this is what we're going to do about it. So in the Q2 report that comes to December Cabinet for this year, we've got the asset disposals in. We're not quite yet there on divestments. So I just need, as I say, I need to work harder at Q3 and getting that regular divestment update. But to me, that would all sit naturally as part of that that quarterly update to Cabinet. So it's all clear what's going on. So there's a regular update.
If I may, Chair. So how much of that is the external environment, and how much is it from within the council, which was in our control, or is it external factors which are impacting rather than our internal involvement?
So in terms of assets and divestments, I mean, my colleagues can help me out if need be, but a lot of them will be on divestments. It will predominantly be external factors, because it will be what the asset is sold at when it's sold, and that's obviously out of our control, because it's what the market will dictate. On the asset disposals, which Rob will explain to us, it's probably a little bit of both, because there will be external factors in terms of when things are sold, what the market is prepared to pay. And we found with some asset disposals, some have come out a little bit lower, some have come out significantly higher. But then there will be some internal factors in that, maybe because the asset disposal plans were done a long time ago, and as with everything, we have to review everything every year. It might be, for example, that something on that plan, there is a decision now not to sell that. But in my view, what we should be saying is, as part of the review that we do, is saying that we have removed something from the plan.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Spate.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. I was just a little bit concerned, and I may have misconstrued what you said. But you were just talking about the preparation of the Q2 forecast, which is due to go to Cabinet, and then you said, I think something along the lines of, we're not quite there yet, and so I'm going to have to take it to Q3. Can you explain what that meant?
Sorry, that's just my terminology. Sorry. The Q2 forecast is done in full, as we always should do. So we've got this significant process internally, in terms of doing a proper forecast, a robust forecast as to where we're going to be at year end, and including a full robust forecast on the savings tracker. So apologies if I've explained that incorrectly. What I was trying to say is I suppose my plan is I would like to include the updates of the capital assets, the asset disposal and the divestments in that quarterly plan. So I suppose I was just being honest and saying we're there on the asset disposals. What I haven't got in the Q2 is an update of the divestments, and what I'm also maybe thinking is whether we need to bring a divestment plan, a divestment update back to Cabinet, and as a separate report, and then pick it up next year in the quarterly updates.
With indulgence, Chair. Yeah, you see that's where the concern for me starts, Dawn, in that you're saying you're not quite able to do a really accurate appraisal. I'll try and summarise it as that, because words are semantics of words. You're not able at this moment to do a really accurate summary of Q2 disposals. or dispersal. So you're not able to do that. And our role here is really is part of the scrutiny process. So I'm really interested to know why you can't give us that information.
So it's not that I can't do an accurate summary. It's probably just more about timing. Now, so what I would like to do is, because we have talked sometime, is that I would like to bring a full divestments report back to the cabinet. So back in March we did an update on fees and talked about divestments. I would ideally like to bring a full report back, so it's very full in terms of where we are. I can easily put in the Q2 report an update of where we are on the divestments as where we are at the moment accurately. That's not an issue. It was more just a timing issue.
These are very difficult circumstances, and you particularly have been thrown in very much at the deep end, for which you have my extreme sympathies. So I get that you're probably still having days when you open cupboards and find things that you weren't necessarily expecting. So I get that it is blurred, I get that it is difficult. But we're now, as a council, into, if you remember, we were put in intervention in September 2022. So we're now 2 years and 2 months into intervention. And during that time, we've spent lots and lots of time and significant amounts of money at trying to improve our systems, our accountability and whatever. And it just worries me that we're still so far off kilter as to being able to be precise. And we get things happening. And this is why I questioned earlier the point of this committee. Obviously, we had the whole apps situation that came along that comes with a degree of risk. It comes with some cost, and that's been discussed. I won't say ad nauseum, but it's been discussed at great length, so we can slightly push that aside. But there are other things that affect it. And being like yourself from Yorkshire, we have the old adage of, look after the pennies and the pound takes care of themselves. And so I go back to things like the Thames side. At the start of the year, when the budget was drawn up, the Thames side was going to be shut by now. It was going to be sold. And there was no provision whatsoever for all the revenue that we're about to take when, the panto starts next week. And over the course of the next 5 years, there'll be quite a bit of money coming into the coffers from there. So where's that, how that is going to impact on the budget? I mean, clearly the budget presumably says we would have got X million for the building, and the budget, let's be realistic, for Snow White, give it a plug, will be, in the tens of thousands, nowhere near. But again, I just worry about the minutiae of detail, which is where we really should be focused on. And I'm not in any way, shape or form I've heard so many good things about what you and since you've come in. So it's not a criticism of you, it's a criticism of our inability to have moved us forward as much as we like. And Rob will know, for example, I mean, I'm particularly annoyed about one particular divestment that's been going on. We may touch on it later on, we may not if it's not appropriate. But I just don't see the building blocks of progress being put in place. I still think we're still in the early storm, we're still swirling round, and I'm just not convinced when I speak to senior officers from the SLT and I talk to directors about their portfolio, their directorships, and they're still not able to be precise. When are we going to be precise?
So I think I think we are. I think our forecasting in terms of our general budget, and the Thames side will be included as part of that revenue budget, both the income and the expenditure. I can never stand here. I would be pretty foolish if I sat here and said everything is going to be perfect all the time, because I can't guarantee that. But I do strongly believe that on our forecasting of our capital and revenue, we have got much more robust and we're much more transparent this year. And we have got very robust procedures in place. We've done additional deep dives in the year to make sure we are confident on the savings tracker for this year, so we know exactly what we're doing, and we've got this in the report, exactly what isn't being achieved and what we're going to do next year about that. And so I do believe that's got much better. And that is part of the reason, and for next year we will be adding to that. We are already going to do an early heads up in January of the savings proposals for next year. Obviously, what have gone through the cabinet process, but I want to make sure very much in January we like do an early heads up of the tracker so we can start to say, right, which ones we're all in place for, brilliant. Where are ones where we maybe haven't slipped on a plan to make sure that we then get back, and if I say back on track, that's going to be misinterpreted, but to make sure that we are ready to go for the 1st of April. So we've got all those plans in place to make sure that, so we know exactly where we are this year, what that means for next year, and you'll find obviously we've been using what's happening in this year in terms of part of the budget setting for next year because it all correlates. And part of my aspiration is to make sure that quarterly update to Cabinet does include as many things as possible which support the budget. Hence why I want to put the asset disposal and divestments in. So it's not about not being accurate. I do know exactly where we are with the divestments plan. So sorry if I said it and it was interpreted as we can't give you accurate information. We can do, but that's my aspiration around that quarterly report, is just trying to make sure that it includes as much useful information as it can do for members.
Thank you. I don't know if this is a question specifically about what you said or more about where we're going to go with the work programme, but our next meeting is the 7th of January. And with the fact we had ONS last week and we've got Cabinet next week, so this meeting has been sort of like the metaphor, like sandwiched awkwardly between the two. What could we realistically achieve on the 7th of January with you here once we've had the ONS, we've had this Cabinet next week, and then we start moving towards like the Christmas period? So very early in the new year we meet up again. What can we do with your presence here and what you know? Okay, so maybe, sorry, Councillor Spate, and then I'll come.
Just to come in on the back of what you said, Martin, I think, and what Dawn said, and maybe it's the nub of what I was trying to say earlier on as to process, and you really touched on a good point then about timescales and where we sit and what have you. And I appreciate that you guys are doing as good a job as you possibly can, and you're aware of a huge amount of information. And it's how we use that information and where and when we use that information that I think is out of kilter. And I'll just give you a tiny little, for instance, as an example, which I think may spring it to mind. For example, I mean, personally, I'm really concerned about the fact that we're charging for Careline next year. It sticks in my craw. It also sits very much in my overview and scrutiny committee that I chair. And at the end of Q1, I had I've got a couple of great directors who came, and I asked, and bearing in mind what we've been told to do, look at finances, can we have some detail into what we've got in terms of adult social care and in terms of children? We had a very broad brush over, but there wasn't a great amount of detail. And then when we came to our meeting only last week, again, I'd asked for an update of where we sit with relation to Q2. And it was, we haven't quite got there, and we haven't got this, that, and the other, and there's a time issue and an element issue. Now, had we had that information that was presented to your committee the other night, your former committee the other night, sorry, Mr. Ben's committee now, bless him, was that, we sat there till 11:30 talking about things, and there was one item relating to Careline. And there was a discussion about it and what it actually brought to the party or didn't bring to the party, and the figure was 135,000 quid. Now, I would have much rather spent my time within my committee, well, it's not my committee, it's our committee, but you know what I mean, looking 2 months ago at Careline, had it been brought up and saying, look, we've got a contentious issue here. It's really significant in terms of adult social care across Thurrock. The budget plan is to implement this on the 1st of January 2025. The projection saving is X, Y and Z and this, that and the other. Now, I know from the broad brushstroke that adult social care is actually doing quite well. It's actually ahead of the game in terms of its savings. So I would be minded had we had that minutiae of detail on certain subject matters to say, okay, let's talk for 10 minutes while we've got the healthcare professionals here. Do we really have to do this with Careline? And if the saving actually, doesn't need to make, we actually need to save 35,000 rather than another. Is there something else we could do to save 35,000 quid that won't have the impact for these elderly people? And so that to me is proper scrutiny. That's a proper decision. We're not going to make that decision. We're then going to bounce it to Cabinet, who will look at, which is exactly what this panel is supposed to be about. So we come up with ideas, we debate it in a timely manner, at an appropriate time, in appropriate detail. But as I keep coming, we're out of kilter. We've definitely got the cart before the horse. Yeah. So I hope you don't mind me making that point, but I think that example is pretty relative to my concern.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's all when I was chairing ONS last year, and a few years now, I've chaired various ONS committees, and it's always been a complaint that this report isn't ready because Cabinet's this way off, or the report is going to Cabinet tomorrow night, so you've got no time to put your opinions into it. So I think it's a pertinent issue that you've raised there, Councillor. Yeah, absolutely. Did you indicate, Councillor Coxwell? Yeah, go.
Yeah.
Sorry for butting in.
You know, I think what Councillor Spate and what you've said, Councillor Kerrin, is exactly the same. And actually, I'm a bit, is that we're in the wrong order. And I'll just note of the agenda this evening. I know we want verbal updates and things like that, but it plays back into that time where councillors can't provide input if they don't know what they're seeing. Yeah. And I think that's the problem of what Councillor Spate's point of the committee. The existence in reality, is it good use of anyone's time when there is other mechanisms that it just fall through, and it's like for some of the financial statutory stuff, the Finance Recovery Board sits there and its minutes are matter of public record. A lot of the stuff that comes through here is seen in that committee beforehand, and there is a minutiae levels of bureaucracy that we report to. Does this committee just exist just to be a recorded version of it, even if it is in the public domain? Is there a better way of actually, if things go to the Cabinet, an email to all councillors with an update, or a bulletin every quarter, or something else to engage councillors to at least make them aware, and then they can easily point saying, oh yes, that's been discussed in this meeting, here's the minutes, here's it all. But it goes back to Finance Recovery Board publishing minutes in a timely manner, but I think that's a separate issue. But it goes back to what is the role of this committee for councillors and for officers who admittedly have got better things to prepare for than verbally recording something they've spoken about in other committees.
I think you're right, Councillor, and also ultimately we've got some really good officers sat here with us, but because it's verbal updates, we can't prepare beforehand. When you look at the membership of our committee, you know that if it was written reports, we come with our agendas loaded with post-it notes and highlights, and dog-eared agenda that's been really, really scrutinised. So, okay, I don't think. Go on.
There is an opportunity on this committee to handle exempt items. Now, I don't know what an exempt item is, but I know that we're meant to go into ask the public to leave or ask the press to leave. So where would the exempt items be handled if there was no investment committee? Because Cabinet is public, scrutiny is public. This is a vehicle where we should be offered the what-ifs. Goodness gracious me, the external environment in property has crashed. And we should be saying, property prices have crashed. How is that now impacting on what we had in our second quarter or third quarter, or the work that you're doing? So that's where I see these, the what ifs, the surprises, because we can't control the surprises. The external factor will throw up all sorts of, not opportunities, challenges against your forecasts, because they are forecasts. Yeah.
Tell you what, Councillor.
You have to ask, I have to ask, where do the exempt items that should be tabled here, where will they be tabled if they're not tabled at this meeting?
Well, I think we can have a look at it when we look at what we're going to put into the work programme for at the end of the meeting, if that's okay. But unless anyone's got anything else to say, we'll obviously there's no recommendations or anything like that, so we'll move on, if I have the agreement of the committee, to Rob Large, and I believe there's slides for this one, yeah. So.
Sorry. Yeah, good evening, everybody. This is a brief snapshot update, and obviously we've already discussed that there might be some issues about the context of this meeting, but what I've been asked to prepare and bring along is just a quick snapshot, and obviously you can ask me questions as you've done at the previous ones. So the asset disposal team snapshot here is the total capital receipts from asset disposals, so that's in the last financial year and this current year, since the programme was set up, is just over 42 million, as you'll see there. And we currently have either in solicitors' hands, under offer or exchange contracts, just under 16 million. At the moment, we have preparing for marketing that already has all the approvals, just under 10 million, you can see there. We've got some properties going to auction with a figure of 685,000 there, and we've currently got actively on the market 4.5 million. So that gives you, as we've described it, a snapshot of the amount of work we're doing and the sort of figures that are involved in what's underway at the moment. And if we just go on to the last slide, Carly, that shows the 5-year forecast, and you'll see that the second year, which we did discuss, and two of you asked me questions at the last time we met under these auspices about whether the forecasting might change, and I said at the time that we were working very hard on due diligence and other challenges, and it has changed insofar as the forecast for this year has come down a little, and the forecast for next year has gone up accordingly as certain properties have been moved out on their timescale. With respect to Councillor Cecil, I wouldn't say that property prices have crashed in general. It depends on the sector. And for example, the picture that we put at the front there is the so-called PIP site, which is an industrial site we've just got on the market at the moment, which has very strong interest in industrial land in the borough. There's an extremely strong demand for it, very high prices, and plenty of people with cash to buy them. So that's a good thing. But when you come to the small, difficult properties to sell, yes, then that market has gone weaker. When the property market is weak, the good stuff still normally sells, and the difficult stuff gets more difficult, and that's probably where we are at the moment. And that's why some of our forecasts have moved out next year. And as part of the due diligence, we obviously do look at the values in more detail, and the values can change from when we had the high-level report on 250 assets done in June and July last year by Avison Young, so in 23, which formed the firming up of the overall plans. You can see on the headings there, there's over 200 properties where we're currently doing due diligence. As you know, we've got a team. We only work on this. We're completely separate from the business as usual asset management and facilities teams. and we use external agents to market to the best effect, and we've got consultancy that we're using where necessary. For example, with land, purchasers do need some surveys in advance, so we do have to spend money on consultancy fees for that, but it helps us achieve the best prices. So as I say, within the context of this meeting, it's a snapshot, but happy to talk to you over and above that.
Thank you, Rob. Anyone have any questions for Rob Large? Councillor Spate?
Yeah, I've got lots of questions, but I don't think there's any much point in asking them, really, because, I mean, this is probably more of a comment than anything else. That's the family silverware there on that board. That's Thurrock's family silverware that we're going to have to do without. I mean, you know, it's interesting, again, the name of this panel is Investment Advisory Panel. None of that's an investment. That's just a fire sale of everything we've got. So the generations that are going to follow us are not going to have anything at all. Oh, sorry, they're going to have very little. I will ask one specific question because, and I feel a bit guilty about asking it, but I asked it at People Overview and Scrutiny the other day, and I was promised an answer and I haven't had it. So maybe, Rob, knowing quite a lot about Thurrock, there's an area of land in Grays to the rear of Hog Lane where Rates Fords is. There's land behind there. In round about 2009, Thurrock Thames Gateway Development Corporation decided it was a great site to build a new community hospital. And much banging of drums and clashing of cymbals, everybody thought it was a great idea. And such a great idea that the TGDC decided, well, we want all this land here. So unfortunately at the moment there's a cadet corps building on it, and the bit next to it there's a post office sorting office. But no, I'll tell you what, let's build them some brand new buildings. And you would know this, Mike, because I think it's in your ward. So we created this patch of land for the new community hospital, and it was a sizable asset. I have been unable to find out whatever happened. That land should have passed. Certainly the TGDC didn't sell it. It was on the books when it came from the TGDC. It hasn't been developed. It's still sat there. I asked a question of the NHS Estates Management last week, and the member of Thurrock Council who's responsible for liaising it, and they didn't even know it existed. So I don't know, Rob, can you help me? Do you know, do we still own that land, or have we sold it? Or if we still own it, are we going to sell it? Because it would seem to me to be an absolutely prime site now.
I'm sorry that I'm going to say what you asked in another meeting, which is that I can't tell you straight away now. I know there have been some inquiries. I think it was from another councillor rather than yourself, but I've certainly seen an email with inquiries, and there is the question of what we own and what other people own. It's certainly not something that we're actively, it hasn't reached at the active stage of our asset list. So I need to look at it with colleagues in Property and FM and asset management. But I think we need to know be clear on the address and to be clear on the site plan. But I'm pretty sure somebody had a look at it. But I don't want to say the wrong thing now, but without checking. But I don't think it's a straightforward piece of land that is owned by us and ours to sell. But there needs to be some work done on it. Yeah.
And my second, which was not going to surprise you at all, Rob, do you happen to have any update on a matter that I've raised several times at Cabinet now, and I've raised it in full council, and I represent this council on the committee? Could you give me any clue or indication what may or may not be happening with the East Thurrock Community Association building?
Well, as you anticipated when you mentioned it earlier, I don't think that's appropriate for here. I'm more than happy to have a telephone call with you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing how the call goes. Councillor Cecil.
Yes, when the property prices start to fall in some of the less attractive areas, what mechanism do you use to allow you to say, right, we're now going to take this off the market?
It's a good question, which I understand, but obviously we have a brief and a forecast to sell lots of property assets. We're not actually, if I may correct Councillor Spate on a comment he made earlier, we are not doing a fire sale. We haven't sold any properties on a fire sale basis. We had lots of approaches, especially in the first few months I were here, from local businesses and London development companies thinking there was a fire sale and things to be bought on the cheap, and I can assure you that nothing that's been sold has been sold on the cheap or as a fire sale whatsoever. In terms of what happens as the market changes, well, one, my team, is a very experienced team. We've all worked in the private sector and the public sector in real estate, so we'd like to think we know what we're doing. We also have our advisors, and our main advisors are Avison Young, and when we're ready to dispose of a property or to market it, we look again at the method of marketing it, at the prices and so on. And as I say, some things have improved in value a little from how they were looked at last year, and some things have dropped a little as well. Now, maybe your question, which is a hypothetical from you, but I'm also giving a hypothetical answer. I don't have a property in mind, but where something has a drastic drop in value for some reason, then we would, of course, consider, should this not be disposed of? Is it better to rent this out to a local business? Is there some reuse of it within the council? But I say, generally, our brief is to sell, and one of the reasons our forecasting varies, as Dawn alluded to earlier, is due to changes in the market. But I can assure you we're achieving the best prices, and we haven't had a scenario where something is so different we really need to rethink it.
I'm pleased to hear that, because if you've got the discretion, you can use your judgment and experience. You're not hidebound by, this is on the asset sale, so we've got to sell it. You're telling me you use your judgment, you use your knowledge, you use your experience. That makes me happy.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that Dawn would pick up on, of course, is that we do have these forecasts, and if we're going to change these forecasts and remove some property from the disposal list, that's going to have to be adjusted in the financial side. But where I'm using my discretion is when we sell, how we get offers. Like, for example, that land we showed a picture on, the strong demand in. So we're doing best offers. Our agents will be doing best offers. We'll then be analysing them. Have people got the money? Will they perform? Will they do the legals in a certain time? So that's where we use our expertise and discretion. But if there was a scenario, as I said earlier, where the prices had changed hugely, or for some other reason, I mean, at the moment we're doing a lot of service engagement as a particular project, because obviously we're getting to some of the properties that are being used by services, and we have to look at how we consider those. So there's a lot of work going on, but there is a presumption towards selling the investments in the forecast, but that's subject to scrutiny and change. And as you know, everything that, if a property hasn't yet got cabinet approval disposal, a lot has, but if it hasn't, we have to take it to cabinet, even though obviously cabinet have approved back in, I think it was February 23, you're nodding, Councillor Coxhill, the whole financial strategy that included this asset disposal strategy and that programme and me and my team being set up. There is still the democratic mandate for councillors to challenge a specific property being sold.
Through the cabinet, that is the vehicle.
Yes, some properties already have a cabinet approval. For example, that one I showed the picture of, that has an old cabinet approval and was taken off the market because there were technical and legal problems that have taken till now to sort out. So obviously that hasn't gone back to cabinet. That forms part of the disposal. But a lot of the properties we're working on and doing due diligence on, if they haven't got a specific cabinet disposal approval for that particular property, they still go to cabinet. But obviously it's within the context, and the covering paper in our cabinet paper always says in the context of that original February 23 disposals programme as part of the overall financial strategy.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question?
Oh,
So, at what stage, or if ever, will the February 23 be reviewed? Whether things should be taken off? External factors have occurred and impinged on this. The February 23 should be a moving beast.
Well, I think that's partly a question for me, and it's partly a question for Dawn, really, because it forms part of the overall financial strategy. But in terms of the property assets that were included in that plan, we are working through those. And if we get to difficulties or that things that can't be disposed of or things have changed, that will go to Cabinet. That won't be in my discretion. But we're still working through, at the moment, our 5-year plan, as was set out in my slide there, is in accordance with Dawn's overall financial plan.
oh, did you want to, Councillor?
Sorry,
Yeah,
just
that's fine.
coming in just to
Yes, please.
explain a bit more about the cabinet role slightly, just for, maybe helpful. I know when I was in cabinet, any property it's on a rolling basis. Or updates of what comes in. We have that immediate 5-year agreement, but then anything that did come through was on pink papers. Any councillor is entitled to look at the pink papers of cabinet meeting.
I'm not familiar with a pink
So
paper.
pink papers are the exempt items. So that is what the stuff that is taken out that is not in the public domain. Obviously, we won't, for commercial reasons, publish what properties we want to go to the market. But you are entitled as a councillor to receive those. And when there is property updates, I remember we took last year's cabinet, we took a big sway of additional properties that were going forward, and there was a debate in full council around the timeliness. And I know we asked for councillors to be informed in their wards if there is a property coming ahead for sale, to make them aware, so they could have consultation into cabinet for that. I know that happened for another properties in my ward, and I think that's still the case now. So it won't be blindsided to see when property sales come forward. There is a stream into it. I think it's just making sure councillors are just continually made aware that what is happening with the assets that is in their wards, but it's of course under the basis that all of this is commercially sensitive. You're not expected to go out and talk about it, but you are given that you should be privileged to that information.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Coxall. What I would just add to that is, at that first cabinet meeting where we were under this new programme, after that there was debate with Councillor Jeffreys as the leader then, and I know that the new leader thinks along similar lines, that we should try and be as transparent and open as we are. And so in the other 2 cabinets where we brought properties forward, and when we bring some properties forward, which will be next February for the next one, the properties are not exempt. So the list of properties are not exempt. What is exempt is the valuation and pricing advice, because that's sensitive. And even some of that has been in the last report as guide prices, because if 5 days after Cabinet, our commercial estate agent is going to be advertising it with a price guide, there's no reason for it not to be in the Cabinet paper, and it gives the Cabinet a feeling for it. But we have had an exempt list which gives the views of what we think we will sell it for, which is different often to the guide price. But that's the only thing that's exempt now. There might be some property that comes up that has to be exempt for some reason, but generally the list of properties and the guide prices are not exempt. The prices we are advised we should get is exempt. I just thought, and then the other thing, as you say, Councillor Coxall, it was brought in that the ward members are told out of courtesy when a property goes on the market. But obviously at that stage, the decisions have all been made and we're ready. But at least they know at the same time as it'll be advertised. Although often they're advertised through the commercial property market, but of course somebody might have a friend who's in that, and so ward councillors would know. And the other thing we've introduced, which the current cabinet asked for, is that we also, again out of courtesy, tell tell the ward members when a completion of a sale has gone through and so there's a new owner. Again, just so they know what's happening on their patch.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for the comments so far. Very much in the spirit of helping each other. Can I just ask, this related to sort of like later on in the meeting as well, where we're going to look at the purpose of this committee, because obviously I could sit here and, oh, there was a piece of land here, piece of land there. You know, like, we all know our wards inside out, and we could all, but I know the answer will be the same to, you know, what you gave to Councillor Spate. So I'm not going to go through the motions there, but you're due to report on this very same item, the disposal programme, on the 5th of March of next year. How will that report be different to this one? I don't mean the actual sort of the granular details, but if we're sat here on the 5th of March, how will it look different to how you've presented tonight, and how we can access information and challenge and offer suggestions, etc.?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cameron. Well, I think there's two parts to that. One is the discussion that started by Councillor Spate, and everyone's talking about the structure of this panel. And I know I've raised, and I know I said it's not my remit, but I have raised at the last two panels that it isn't clear, and that doesn't help officers, as Councillor Spate said, in how we report to it. But if it carries on as it is, it will be the reporting our financial progress. It will be down to the hard numbers of assets sold, assets not sold, how that fits in with the forecasting, which, you know, Dawn keeps me on my toes about quite rightly. And as Dawn mentioned about the overall financial forecast, where we're behind, where we're ahead, if we're ahead, why we're ahead, and what we're doing about it. So I see it as that. In terms of asking where members can ask questions about specific properties, of course, by having this separate dedicated team that I lead, it does mean sometimes a member doesn't know whether to really ask me or to ask the AD of Property and FM, because some of the business, for example, if a tenant of a business was having a problem they felt with their rent review and raised it with their councillor, well, that wouldn't come to me, that would come to the AD of Property and FN. But then it might turn out the reason there's a problem with the rent review is because we're selling the property and it's in our best interest to not deal with it. So, so it's very good that we've got me and my team focused entirely on this disposals programme, which, as Councillor Spate said, is unfortunate, but is part of the financial plan. And separately, we've got the asset management business as usual team. So I think really it is a question of members either coming directly to me or to Andrew Lowe, who's the new interim AD of property, or going to the portfolio holder, to Sarah Muldowney. But, you know, if there's an issue raised by issue raised by a resident that a member wants to bring up, then it obviously should either come to me or to Andrew Lowe, depending on what it is. In terms of more detailed analysis of why we're selling things, what we're selling them for, and so on, well, obviously I report to Dawn. I report either through Dawn or myself to SLT, and I report again through Dawn to the FRB as well. So I'm not thinking that they're things that I'd be discussing with individual members, and of course, again, sometimes that is also commercially sensitive. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it just leads us when we come on to the end, where we sort of look at what's coming up, whether there's much point of another one of these items. If I hope I've misinterpreted your words, but it's kind of more, you're suggesting more individual routes that you can come to me if you want to know this, or have I misinterpreted?
Well, I'm thinking for specific properties, yes. I think that what I've reported here today is what Dawn says she's going to include in her quarterly financial report. It's already included in the reports to FRB, which sometimes I go and explain things, other times Dawn deals with it as part of her report. So it's already being reported, the progress, and if at that level. And obviously the new property disposals, as we've just talked about, go to Cabinet. So I think if there's a specific issue about a specific property, which would probably be more wearing your ward member hat rather than a committee or Cabinet or shadow Cabinet hat, then I think that needs to come through to property. And I say it might be Andrew Lowe and his team in the business usual, or it might be me and my team in the asset disposal team. And sometimes it might not be obvious, you know, which it is.
Thank you. So thank you very much for that. The next item is exempt. So I'll wait for Carly to confirm the recording has been paused, and then we'll go into exempt. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back. Thank you to everyone who hung on in there. So we are now on to item 8, the work programme. Currently, for the 7th of January, we have an investment portfolio update. Anyone like to comment on the work programme, things to include, etc., and then we'll agree. Yes, Councillor Spate.
Given what I said earlier on and given what we've said in the meeting, I'm not sure that and some of the things that we've heard this evening, I'm not sure that that's actually going to be that informative to us. So I suppose we have a choice. We either bring something else to go in that with it, or we put it down to say put it back to the 5th of March, which again, given back what we've talked about earlier, it may well be that there'll have been significant discussion by then, and it could be that the 5th of March would be an appropriate time to wrap up the life of this committee, because we're going to have a new council a couple of months after that. But that'd be my observation. I don't really see any point of dragging these good people in the first week after Christmas for something that, to be fair, I don't think is going to significantly change.
To be honest, Councillor Spate, I was thinking when I asked Dawn the question about bringing it to the 7th of January and Cabinet next week, and then, you know, my teacher head is on about thinking about when the holidays are, and then, yeah, you're right, we're straight back in early New Year. So are you suggesting we don't have that meeting and then have a broader and more packed agenda for the 5th of March?
Yeah, because, again, I've been shooting myself in the foot. Having talked earlier on about the validity of this meeting and how it shapes our whatever, things I can't talk about that we did in our brief exempt session, which were very informative, and actually were really useful. Yeah. So I've sort of invalidated my own opposition. So to try and round a square, why don't we, as I say, take the item on the investment portfolio update off the 7th, not have a meeting on the 7th, and then have a meeting on the 5th of March when we have all four. And as I say, at that, it may well be that other members, officers and yourself have a chinwag, and it may well be that we could knock it on the head then, if people agree with that, but it's up to the guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I don't think there's anything to be gained having a meeting on the 7th, but I think it's completely reasonable. This committee actually has a conversation with itself to figure out, is this really the right reporting way that we need? I don't think it works. And looking at the work programme into March, disposal programme, treasury management, that stuff goes to cabinet, corporate. There is other reporting lines within the traditional ways, and anything else, the inputs go through finance recovery board and things like that. And I think that I don't quite see how this fits. I think I've always been in favour of cutting another layer of bureaucracy, and if this means cutting more bureaucracy, I think that's quite a sensible way, because I don't think there is anything really gained wise in terms of the private conversations we've had in the exempt. I think that's the helpful bit. I think there's another conversation of how do you have that with councillors separately? Do you really need a meeting to do that? Because even it's public, but suddenly we're all in private session anyway. Perhaps there's an engagement session with councillors specifically to do legal updates rather than bring it through this committee.
So sorry, can I just throw one caveat in that having sort of slightly expressed annoyance previously, that as a councillor, the first thing I found about apps, which is pretty significant for this council, not least in terms of the PR situation, was from an article. I think it was on the BBC or the FT. I can't remember which one it was. And I genuinely was that's the first time I saw it. And I did think at the time it would have been nice when the council sat down to make that decision, just to put a round robin to members of this committee and say, look, we've got a brief, we've got an informal briefing. Have you got 20 minutes, half an hour? We'll do it as a Teams. You don't have to come in, and do it. So having had a caveat that we don't need to meet until March, were something substantive to happen, then yourself as chair, and whether it be Dawn, Mark, Rob, or whoever, just get your heads together and think, actually, yeah, it'd be good. Just and just so that we're told before we read it in the media, because you know,
Right.
somebody shoot me for saying
Great point, Councillor Spake. Can I put as an action? I know Carly's writing it down now. So if the four of you could let me know if anything like that comes up, and then I'll liaise with the committee. But I know can we just take a vote so it's formal that we're not going to meet on the 7th?
Something else. I'm quite happy about the 7th, but just something else come to mind. We're working all the way through somebody's new model, aren't we? And this is part of the new model. I don't know how the investment, excuse me, is this seen as the braces of the belt and braces? If the scrutiny wasn't able to extract, this gives another layer, you say bureaucracy, but it gives another opportunity, because somebody like me who's new to the game, not going over old coals, but 3-4 years ago, if you'd had an investment panel set up like this, would you have got more?
Is that?
Well,
is that a
yeah,
for me
so-
to response?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can do. I think no. I think there's a long hat. I'm obviously I'll defend my own father's administration. I will defend the previous
Yeah,
administration,
I'm-
obviously. But I
I'm-
think there's
I'm just being
there's
open and
Yeah, no. I
transparent.
think there's a wider issue around historically what happened in Thurrock, scrutiny failing. I think that goes into our recovery plan, and I know I'm talking 10, 15 years. We took these investments started in 2011.
Yeah.
Like that's how long back we are talking about some of this, the way we operated. I think but that's a wider issue of governance failing in Thurrock systemically. I don't think.
I've heard you say that before, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite the matter of where we are now. I think that's
but I'm just saying,
a wider
where does
issue.
this investment panel fit
I tell you what we'll do. Why don't, with your indulgence committee, how about on the work programme, we actually have a formal item about this committee, the purpose of it, and then whatever we decide as a committee, I'll request to go to Cabinet to explain why we think it should change or why it should not even exist at all. But why don't we have that as an actual item?
Yeah, with the other guys who are missing,
Yeah, and we'll do it properly, and it's either and that meeting on the 5th of March will either be the retirement drinks, or it will be the new lease of life where we've gone forward. Okay, but I just thank you all, thank you officers, thank you members, and I declare this meeting closed at 8:30. Thank you.